newest partner, Ryan Schumacher. So there's 5 of us that serve as a private trustee and executor. And we have offices in San Diego, Orange County, also in Beverly Hills, as well as in Temecula. And then Noah Benton also has an office in New Hampshire where he comes back to California and serves on his cases, and he also can serve on cases in New Hampshire as well. So Matthew, go ahead and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, you bet. My name is Matt McClintock. I'm founding partner of a law firm that's based in Evergreen, Colorado, which is a small town just about a half hour west of Denver, up in the pretty part of Colorado. But we've got clients all around the country, and we've got quite a few international clients as well. We're a boutique law firm focused exclusively on sophisticated estate plan design, implementation, and management for ultra affluent individuals. And it was kind of in that context that I got introduced to Bitcoin specifically in 2017. And then since 2017, I've been increasingly active in the crypto space. And so I was honored. I met Joe online. I think we connected probably through LinkedIn first. He reached out to me and we started kind of chatting back and forth and found some synergies. So we've been able to do some really interesting estate planning with clients who have valuable digital assets, crypto assets, doing some work in the NFT space now as well. So yeah, happy to connect. I put up our contact information slide first, so Joe's information and my information is there. Feel free to reach out to me if you've got thoughts, want to collaborate, want to connect on LinkedIn or whatever. Yeah, so super honored to be part of this conversation. Is it appropriate, Joe, if we just kind of jump in and start kind of going from there?
Perfect. Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about first. We're going to discuss a little bit of the prevalence of crypto assets among our clients, and these are your clients. These are clients that you already have that you may or may not necessarily know that they've got crypto assets, because I've been surprised at where these clients are and where they come from. One of the things that we'll touch on a little bit is one of the prevailing one part of the prevailing ethos in crypto often runs headlong into proactive estate planning, and so we'll talk a little bit about what that friction point is and maybe how we can address it a little bit. We're going to talk about what I refer to as the practical fragility of digital wealth. Blockchain technology, which we're not going to really get into a whole lot here, but blockchain technology itself is very much designed to be what's called anti-fragile. It is, in big blockchains, it is literally unhackable, and it is, as far as the data and the assets itself, those are very, very resilient. But the fragility comes in our ownership of those crypto assets. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. We'll also touch on some of the tax issues that we run into with crypto. We're going to talk about some trust design considerations, because there are some opportunities under the law that we can and should be taking advantage of if we're designing estate plans for clients who have crypto assets. And we're going to talk about some of the trust administration fiduciary considerations. And this is really Joe's forte. So he's going to be taking the lead in that conversation for sure. And then we'll have just kind of some final thoughts, kind of some parting shots, and hopefully have some time for questions and answers. It'd be my hope that we hold questions to the end, because you may have questions that occur to you. Jot those down, put them in the chat feature, but we're going to try to get to those at the end, just in the off chance that we get a chance to touch on your question at a later point in the presentation. So absolutely open to questions. And if you've got a question for me that occurs after the fact, my contact information's in the slide deck. Certainly feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share my thoughts on this stuff. So who are these people who have crypto? Well, it's easy to think of younger folks because that's probably where the highest concentration per capita of crypto asset investors live. I mean, these are often millennials, these are Gen Z, entrepreneurs, and they're often what we'll refer to sometimes as crypto OGs. You know, some of the original members to the crypto party, people who got involved in it from a very, very beginning, and many of them, as we'll talk about a little bit, got into it primarily on ideological grounds, in addition to the technological grounds. And as a result of that, a lot of these folks are tech geeks, but not all of them are. A lot of them are self-professed libertarians. Not all of them are. Some are crypto anarchists, which is a term you'll see in some of the stuff online that you might get into, but not all of them are. Some of them are risk takers, but not all of them are. We're seeing a lot of our traditional affluent clients who took a company public. They're used to outsized returns, and now they're looking for something else. They're adding exposure to crypto for asymmetrical returns. We're seeing these with clients who have grats, for example, that are looking for an outsized overperformance beyond the 75-20 hurdle rate. People who have never expressed interest in crypto before are expressing interest in crypto. My biggest Bitcoin client to date is a divorcee in California who through a divorce, her ex-husband gave her 10,000 Bitcoin tokens. 10,000 Bitcoin tokens. And so that's been as high as 65,000 or 63,000 per token in recent months. And now it's hovering right around 35,000 per token. So doing the math, that's a $350 million estate at today's value, all in Bitcoin. She's in her mid 50s. And so we're doing some interesting planning for her. Grandparents. I've got a client whose parents are 93 years old. They have Bitcoin. Long story short, these folks are everywhere. They are everywhere. There is recent data that was published by Bitcoin Market Journal. I think there's a link in some of our materials that said that at least 11% of the entire United States population, doesn't seem like a big number, but 11% of the entire US population has Bitcoin. That's one crypto asset. Extrapolate that out across the entire crypto asset space. I think it's fair to say that there's probably close to, 15, 20% at least of the population who has crypto. So these folks are everywhere, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This is a quick look at the crypto asset growth data. And I've attached links to our sources here in case you ever want to kind of dig through some of the data. This was the last day the information was available. So at the time, Bitcoin was trading right around 57,000. That's gone down significantly. It's trading around 35,000 right now. But looking at the number of active addresses, these are the number of active wallets that are trading in Bitcoin. That's over 1.1 million wallets that were trading on just that one day. Granted, that's global, but this is a big, big audience. You look at the crypto asset growth data, and you can see why clients who are looking for some exposure to outsized returns are getting interested in crypto. I just did a post to Twitter that was looking at my personal holdings year to date. My Bitcoin, even after the big bloodletting of the month of May, which was undeniably a bad month for Bitcoin, Bitcoin is still up over 23% year to date. The closest other asset in my portfolio is Facebook, same rate of return. Tesla, which is no longer part of my book, is down over 20% year to date. So clients who are looking for outsized returns are getting interested in crypto. And this is kind of where some of the, if you're looking at clients who have been in the crypto space for a long period of time, part of the crypto ethos, if you will, is this concept of you hold the keys. So you have your private key. It's your keys, your coins. You are your own bank. And so the idea here is this concept of financial self-sovereignty. And so this is where a lot of the libertarian mindset has kind of grown up around crypto. And at its core, which hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about maybe a little bit later on in some parting thoughts, is disintermediation, or this removing intermediaries between human transactions is part of the entire crypto ethos. But the problem with that is if you hold the keys and you lose those keys, you become the single point of failure. If you lose your private keys, you lose access to those assets, likely forever. And as you can kind of start to think through this, if I have crypto of any type and I don't have a succession plan in place, the wealth that I build in crypto assets is very fragile wealth. If I die and I don't have a succession plan for my private keys or for my crypto, odds are my spouse or my partner or my kids will never have access to that wealth that I could otherwise transfer to them. And importantly, the very decentralized nature of crypto makes it difficult to find a single solution for most clients. Joe's going to talk a lot about custodial options. And so there are some solutions that are taking place, but at its core, the ethos of crypto towards decentralization runs and kind of flies in the face of centralized operational management. We're also going to talk about different types of crypto assets, and different types of assets require different wallet solutions. To my knowledge, there's not yet a single omnibus wallet that will hold every type of crypto asset that's out there. So as we'll talk about, different types of crypto assets accomplish different things. And so as a result, they have to reside in different cryptographic wallets. And the wallets are all created somewhat differently. So each type of wallet requires a different type of management and succession solution. Because as Joe's going to talk about, I think, every wallet has a private address or private key and a public address. And it's that private key that unlocks access to the value of the crypto that's on the blockchain. And so if you don't have a succession protocol for that private key, the wealth that is hiding inside that locked compartment, if you will, in the blockchain, will remain locked. And so different types of crypto assets require different types of wallets. Different types of wallets have different private keys. So you have to have a complete succession protocol for every type of private key you've got. So this is just a really quick rundown of different types of crypto assets that I'm sure you've heard of. And this is an oversimplification, but even this is pretty dang complicated. There are certainly what I've referred to here as commodity assets or investment assets, assets that are simply a volatility play for a lot of US based crypto investors. It's a volatility play. So there's Bitcoin, there's Ether, which is the Ethereum blockchain, there's Litecoin, there's Dash, there's Bitcoin Cash. There's a whole bunch of different types of crypto assets that are designed to operate like investment vehicles, and I think more commonly like commodities. Then there are assets that are called stable tokens. And a stable token is not a volatility play. A stable token is a liquidity play. Stable tokens are usually pegged to the value of a sovereign currency. So each of these stable tokens that are on here, there's USDC, there's Tether, there's a Binance token on here. They're all pegged to the value of the US dollar. So one token equals $1 USD. So it's not a volatility play. It's not even a tax play at all, because it's simply a matter of these tokens get used to provide liquidity to fund exchanges. They also have a role to play sometimes in what's called DeFi, or decentralized finance. That's really all DeFi stands for, is decentralized finance, where various crypto asset traders can use online platforms to convert from one type of crypto asset to another type of crypto asset without going through a centralized exchange. So these decentralized finance options have tokens, some of which are represented here by the common image that they have. And these are often used for generating yield, generating a return off of pledging those assets back to the blockchain. And I know this is super technical, and we're not going to get into it a whole lot more than this, but understand that DeFi assets are often a type of asset that can generate additional income for clients, which is why they're interested in it. And then we've all kind of heard, even on things like the nightly news, this whole idea of NFTs, these non-fungible tokens. These you can think of these as digital collector's items. Sometimes it's famous photography where you can actually own an authenticated copy of a digital photograph. Some of these on the screen here, the one on the far left, this kind of monster looking guy, that's a non-fungible token that is available inside an online game. And I've got a client right now who has $4 million worth of non-fungible tokens in an online game. Why? Well, first of all, there's the bragging rights of being the collector who has these things. But some of these non-fungible tokens also have alternative revenue sources. My client can loan out those non-fungible assets inside the game to get a yield off of those. So there's just a whole lot going on in this crypto asset space. It's not just one thing. It's a lot of different things. So where's the value here? Certainly the market volatility that we talked about. We've seen clients receive tokens in exchange as compensation, whether it's grants as a part of a project. I've been paid in Bitcoin before. Sometimes tokens are purchased or traded as investment vehicles. There's what often comes as surprise money, these things called hard forks that generate new tokens, or airdrops that generate free tokens and you didn't even ask for it. That's surprise money, but it's taxable. And we talked a little bit about DeFi income. So let's talk about some of the tax issues here. Really, the most complete pronouncement we have dates back to 2014 when the IRS gave us notice 2014-21. Importantly, the application of that was limited only to convertible virtual currency. Upshot is it's treated as property. It's just like you got paid in stock. The value in US dollar terms when received is ordinary income to you. So you have to pay taxes on that. But as a capital asset, it's now subject to your short-term or long-term holding period. So you get to pay ordinary income tax on the US dollar equivalent value when you received it. And when you later dispose of that asset, the gain or loss on that asset is going to be subject to capital gains, subject to your holding period. That's the upshot. And so that's what we have to work with right here. The thing here too is they did talk a little bit about in some of the notes accompanying this revenue ruling 2019-24 talks specifically about hard forks and airdrops. Again, this is that surprise money I was talking about. Even if you didn't want it, even if you didn't sign up for it, if you receive access to that wealth that was generated, that is income in the IRS's eyes. So it's very, very common for social media influencers who are big in the crypto space to just be granted tokens by somebody who's got this big project. Vitalik Buterin, who's the founder of the Ethereum project, was famously awarded like $4 million worth of this coin called Doge recently. He didn't want it. He didn't ask for it. He didn't pay for it. It was just given to him. He turned around and gave that away to fund charitable operations in India. But on his 1040 next year, he'd better report that $4 million worth of free tokens that came in. So you can trigger income for somebody just by giving them these tokens. And I think of this as, from the estate planning context, one of the strategies we'll do from time to time is grant a beneficiary a testamentary general power of appointment in a trust instrument that we might create. We don't have to tell them about it. They don't have to know it exists, but the very fact that they have a general power of appointment over assets inside of a trust causes estate inclusion for them. And as a result, one of the reasons we've been doing this is to get a step up in basis for capital gains tax purposes when that holder of the power of appointment dies. It's very much the same way. You didn't ask for it. You didn't even necessarily you had it, but the fact that you possessed it generated liability. It's important to also understand that the United States Treasury is acutely sharpening its focus on crypto assets. There was a John Doe summons against Coinbase, which is a San Francisco-based exchange for crypto assets. It's among the biggest in the world. Recently went public, so you've probably heard about them. In 2016, they had a summons, and they were forced to turn over 13,000 account holders' information for account holders who had more than $20,000 in transactions. Now, back in 2016, that's a lot of transactions. Now, that could easily be one transaction. That yielded more than 1,000 amended returns and more than $25 million in additional taxes and settlements from taxpayers. So that kind of put a flag in the ground for the IRS saying, hey, we're going to take this stuff seriously. Now, two other major exchanges or companies in this space are trying to fight off summonses that are pending against them as well. Also, you've probably seen this with some of your clients already. New for your 2020 tax return, there's a question in the middle of page 1 on your 1040 that says, at any time during 2020, did you receive, sell, send, exchange, or otherwise acquire any financial interest in virtual currency? The IRS provided some clarifying information in their FAQs, but the Treasury is really sharpening its focus on crypto because they believe that there's a lot of unreported income tax waiting to be collected there. There's another case, we're not going to get into this. There's another major case that is in the DeFi space. It's pending right now. It's the Tezos case pending in Nashville. So there's just more and more happening in this space. So what do we do from a planning perspective with clients who have crypto? We talked about the fact that when you receive a crypto asset, the value in US dollars, the USD equivalent is reportable income, ordinary income to you, and is treated as a capital asset for purposes of capital gains or capital losses for your, subject to your holding period, long-term or short-term holding period. The exception there would be if you are in a business and somehow the crypto is part of your inventory, like if you're running an exchange. Most clients, it's a capital asset. So because it is a capital asset, it then lends itself potentially to some interesting capital gains tax strategy work. So we've been doing some interesting planning in the space around capital gains tax mitigation for our California client who's got a lot of Bitcoin. And we've been doing a fair bit of completed gift wealth transfer tax planning for federal gift and estate tax purposes. So, with your thinking hat on, you can kind of think in some respects the same strategies that you would do for a client who has highly appreciated assets. It doesn't matter what the asset is in some respects. If the asset is highly appreciated and is worth a lot, it gets us thinking about appropriate advanced estate planning options, completed gift trusts, irrevocable non-grantor trusts, or these ING trusts, which I know are in the crosshairs in California. Charitable trusts. We're doing some work right now with charitable remainder trusts and charitable lead trusts and creating an operating foundation, all of which will be fueled by crypto assets. So the same strategies that you can do for stock portfolios or real estate portfolios or whatever, those same strategies apply. The trick and the devil becomes in the details around custody, transferring ownership to sever dominion and control for tax purposes, and get the assets out of the client's estate and for ing trust purposes into a zero tax capital gains tax jurisdiction. Let's talk a little bit about some of the trust design considerations that we're getting into with our trusts when we're dealing with crypto assets. One thing I think is worth thinking about is using a restatement second jurisdiction instead of a restatement third or UTC jurisdiction. Why? Well, the restatement second approach to trusts generally favors settlor's intent as the North Star for that trust. Restatement second usually favors settlor's intent. Restatement third and the Uniform Trust Code jurisdictions kind of flip that around a little bit and say, well, you know, what's really going to be our North Star is the beneficiary's interests inside this trust. And the challenge with that is twofold, I suppose. One, when we say that we're viewing the trust primarily through the lens of what the beneficiary receives, we could then extrapolate that out and say we're also kind of viewing it through the lens of what the beneficiary's creditors might receive. And so we have a tendency to favor restatement second type jurisdictions like Nevada, like Wyoming, like South Dakota, like Alaska, over restatement third jurisdictions. And you may be thinking, well, hey, Wyoming is a UTC jurisdiction, and you would be right, except that Wyoming did not make that pivot from settlor's intent to beneficiaries' rights. So Wyoming is still a pro-settlor jurisdiction. So one thing to think about is, where are you going to plant this thing from a situs perspective? Another thing to think about is what jurisdiction or jurisdictions have crypto-specific statutes. And right now, there is exactly one competitor in that space. And right now, Wyoming owns it. Wyoming has got a pretty comprehensive body of crypto asset and blockchain related legislation on the books. And they've decided that they're going to claim the target situs for crypto asset related planning. Other states are going to catch up. They're going to do this. But Wyoming is well ahead of the pack right now. And this is really where Loren's private trustee comes in, finding crypto savvy fiduciaries, finding people who can actually administer these trusts, who have some kind of understanding around how these crypto assets operate. I believe it's fair to consider including a clear preamble expressing the settlor's intent, which might even include a statement authorizing crypto as a legitimate asset class within the trust. We don't do this all the time, but for clients who are really crypto heavy and intend to stay crypto heavy, we'll put right up front as part of the settlor's intent that they perceive crypto assets to be a legitimate asset class and expressly authorizing their trustee to transact in crypto assets. Oops. Couple other trust design considerations here. We're big fans of directed trusts, and I know Joe and his team are as well. One of the things that we could think about here is carving out the crypto asset investment role to a specific fiduciary who knows how to manage crypto assets, and kind of firewall that off from your situs holding trustee or from your distribution trustee or distribution advisor. We need to make sure that we modify or potentially even waive the prudent investor rule as it relates to these crypto assets, because absent express waiver or absent express modification, I think we might be hard pressed to allow the standard prudent investor rule to allow us to have crypto inside of our trusts. We also expressly, when it's appropriate, we expressly authorize over concentrated investment positions. Most of our crypto clients so far are very, very bullish on crypto and are intentionally overweighted in crypto investments. 70% of their entire wealth may be in Bitcoin or maybe in some other type of crypto asset or in a pool of crypto assets. So we will, in appropriate cases, specifically within the four corners of the trust instrument, authorize concentrated investment positions, authorize holdings in crypto, authorize investment generating activities, whether it's lending, renting, leasing non-fungible tokens, obtaining royalties off of NFTs, staking, participating in decentralized finance activities, lending against commodity tokens like Bitcoin. We often will also include provisions that allow the trustee to distribute crypto in kind to the beneficiaries and to do it asymmetrically among beneficiaries. If one beneficiary wants it and the other one doesn't, we allow the trustee to distribute that asymmetrically. We include language and provisions concerning guidance for best practices and specific thresholds above which the private key management solution that the trustee follows changes. We authorize, and in some cases, we even direct the trustee to obtain fiduciary liability insurance to protect the trust from loss incurred by other fiduciary service providers like your crypto asset trust advisor. We also think it's a best practice. We don't think it's required, at least not in the jurisdictions where we practice, but we prefer to have beneficiaries sign off and give a consent and waiver and release authorizing the trustee to engage in crypto asset activities, especially if those activities have an outsized risk of loss or lock up access to the crypto for a period of time due to a staking contract, for example, or a lending contract. In California, one of the things we might think about is resitusing the trust to take advantage again of more favorable jurisdictions like Wyoming or South Dakota. In our inherited trusts, where I die and I leave a long-term continuing trust for the benefit of my daughters, I give guidance that says that the trustee can concentrate or that the trustee does not have to segregate the crypto assets into multiple wallets, but can hold those basically as a pooled wallet for the benefit of multiple sub-trusts. And again, back in line with the directed trust model, we often will allow the beneficiaries to become their own crypto asset investment trustee or trust advisor so they can manage the crypto assets inside their own subtrust. So a couple more thoughts before I turn it over to Joe here. Right up front, in your very first contact with your prospective client, you should be asking them if they have any type of crypto asset holding. You don't have to understand it all, but you need to be asking the question. There is significant wealth tied up in crypto. And for some of your clients, it's going to be consequential to the success or failure of their estate plan. So I'm going to submit that if you're not asking if your clients have crypto, you're probably doing them a significant disservice. We include that in our intake questionnaire right up front. Do you have holdings in crypto assets? Because if we're not planning for that, we might as well not be planning for their small business, or we might as well not be planning for their Schwab portfolio. We need to be asking. We also should then ask, how important is this to you? Why are you interested in crypto? Is it a long-term play for you? Is it a short-term, hey, I'm just looking for a outsized return for a short period of time and then I'm out? Because knowing some of the answers to those questions will help shape the design of the trust. It's certainly going to impact the decision-making concerning your fiduciaries and whether it's appropriate to then think about fragmenting that fiduciary's responsibility. So Joe, that's kind of it for me right now. I'm gonna turn it over to you, and I'm gonna.
All right. Well, thanks, Matt, for that overview. It was really good. So many things that we can get into there. But I want to take everybody through just a high level, fiduciary considerations, what you're thinking about when you're, talking to your clients and you're creating a plan and you're thinking about the fiduciary for that plan. So I'm going to go through 3 scenarios when it comes to crypto holdings. So the first scenario, total estate's 20 million with 5 million in crypto holdings. Second scenario, total estate 20 million, 300K in crypto holdings. And the third scenario is total estate 2 million and 30K in crypto holdings. And I think likely that third scenario can come up a lot. And like what Matt said is you can go through that first time talking with your client and just kind of maybe forget to ask about the holdings. And like, it's good to have on your intake questionnaire, because I think the clients even forget when they're going through their assets. If they have lots of real estate, if they have a lot of standard investment assets, they may forget that they bought something that their friend told them to buy, 5 years ago, and it's just sitting on an exchange, and it's increasing in value like it has been. So it's always good to ask. So the first scenario. So this is a lot of what the type of planning that Matt is doing, and you're really thinking about jurisdiction on how to handle this. So when you have 5 million in crypto holdings, it's probably a good idea to set up that separate trust in the trustee just for crypto holdings. It's likely held with an institutional custodian like a Gemini or Anchorage, among others. There's a lot of institutional custodians out there. Gemini and Anchorage seem to be the best from the people that I've spoken with. But these types of things are changing all the time. You're going to want to, with these institutional custodians, they're going to have software in place where you can use the multi-signature process to gain access to distribute to the next generation. And I'll go over that and how that works in a couple of slides. But I think it's really important to have proper security in place, and that'll kind of be what I talk about a lot during this process too. And then, as Matt said, Wyoming, the Wyoming jurisdiction just seems to be by far the best right now. These laws are constantly changing. I fully expect some of the other favorable states when it comes to trust to adopt something similar to Wyoming, but it's not there just yet. And also something kind of super interesting that just happened is that El Salvador actually passed Bitcoin as a legal tender for their country. And they're actually going to mandate that you have to essentially accept, if you're a business, you actually have to accept Bitcoin just like you accept US dollars, because that's their other, essentially their national currency. So it's super interesting when thinking about different jurisdictions and things as well, because many people may move to El Salvador because they're actually offering ways to invest in benefits. So the second scenario, 20 million and 300K in crypto holdings. So, this is actually how this presentation kind of came up. Don, I think, had sent a message to the listserv about, Coinbase and, it's planning for it and things like that. And I did a little bit of research, and I realized that Coinbase actually did not have trust accounts. So, 300K in crypto holdings is probably not large enough for a separate trust. And it may not be large enough to be held in a direct trust account that you personally set up. So one option you can do is you can set up an LLC, and many exchanges allow you to set up a business account. So essentially the trust would own the business. But that also creates more complexity in terms of compliance and considering the cost of formation of the LLC and the yearly costs and taxes and things like that. So that's something you want to look at a little bit more and do a little bit of research on. Another option is really to use a crypto advisor who can provide you institutional trust account access. This is kind of a new developing area. I've talked to a few. One of them charges, for example, 2% to manage your essentially digital assets. That's basically double what a traditional asset percentage may be. So it's super important to kind of know who this person is, do research what their background is, because there's so many new people being onboarded that they may actually really not know exactly what they're doing as a crypto investment advisor, since it's such a new space. And then in this scenario too, you're going to want to have a successor trustee that has some crypto experience. This could end up being a huge liability to the trust if it's not administered correctly. And in this scenario, maybe there's a family member, so that you want to make sure that the family member has access to an expert in this area that they can call and ask and potentially hire to help them manage that process. So the third scenario, and this is 2 million estate value and 30K in crypto holdings. It's likely not large enough to be held under an institutional trust account nor under an LLC because the costs are too high. If the crypto is held in an exchange like Coinbase, then you're potentially looking at a small estate affidavit to basically get access to it. Coinbase just says you need to provide probate documents to get access, and that's obviously something we don't want to open up a full probate. So the small estate affidavit may have to work, but that also doesn't always work as well. If it's held in cold storage, private key access to the cold storage must be provided to the successor trustee, but that does create risk because you need to trust the person you share the information with. So as soon as you share, like what Matt was talking before with cold storage, which that means, and we'll go over this in a second, essentially, it's on a hardware wallet that you hold in your home, in your drawer, with your Bitcoin on it, or any other cryptocurrency. You have to, as soon as you give away those private keys to your successor trustee, to your attorney, technically they could access those that Bitcoin and essentially remove it from the wallet, and you potentially could lose all of that. Also, if let's say you share this information with an attorney that retires, and then he's supposed to hand it over to the next person, and something happens to him, or your successor trustee just loses your private keys if you decide to give them that information. There's, like Matt talks about, that single point of failure. Even involving other people in this process, there's so many points of failure that can happen between the time that you do your planning and then 20 years down the road. So, security is super important, but also balancing that with being able to, pass it on to the next level is really important as well. So there's a company called Casa. They're trying to solve for things like this. They've created software with the multi-signature controls that we'll go over in a second. And the Bitcoin is essentially can automatically be passed. And they basically are open to anybody. You can pay a monthly fee, but it's only Bitcoin only. And most people nowadays that have acquired Bitcoin have started to buy some of the other assets that Matt talks about as well. So it's hard to just have a service that's Bitcoin only. So next, I want to talk a little bit about crypto volatility, because as trustee, there's nothing worse than having an asset that is worth 300,000, and then in 2 weeks it's worth 150,000, and the beneficiaries, like, what happened? So that's where I see a lot of the liability for being a trustee that is holding a crypto asset. And other cryptocurrencies can be even more volatile. There's, this is the significant risk, and my general, depending on how the planning was done, if you have Matt as the attorney, you're probably not as nervous as when you take over. But if you take over on you can take over on a probate, or you take over on a trust where the planning was done 20 years ago and somebody added this in, and my suggestion is you're really going to petition for instructions and go in and get to court immediately. And you're probably going to want to use a crypto advisor in that scenario as well, to basically provide documentation to the judge to say, here's what the advisor thinks we should do. Here's, what the beneficiaries potentially, may want to do. And, it just really depends on how the trust is written. But you can see, with the Bitcoin price being, like Matt said, it hovers, it's hovering around 35 or 36,000, but, like it was up at upwards of 64,000 almost a month ago. So that volatility is the biggest risk to holding these assets in trust. So now I want to talk about establishing multi-signature controls. So what does multi-signature mean? Essentially, it's a digital signature scheme which allows a group of users to sign a single document. So when you think about holding your Bitcoin, say on like an institutional custodian, like a Gemini, you want to make sure you can pass it on, but you're also nervous about sharing your private keys. And you don't want to just share it with one person. So instead you share your private keys maybe with 2 other people. So you essentially 3 people have access to the private keys, but they essentially all have, maybe 2 of them only have to sign off. So it kind of depends on how you want to set it up. And why do you do this? Because it's security, and no one person has control over the assets. So then that way they can be passed on. So some of the different approaches on the multi-signature. So you can do 2 of 3. So 2 people can make a decision, and they can decide to move the asset, or it can be 3 of 5. And you can say 3 of 3. It's really up to you how you want to plan it out, and you have the experts at these companies to suggest what they've seen works the best. Really, you want to set up a succession plan. I mean, that's the important part. And, it's really, and also the strategy can keep the settler or beneficiaries in control while maintaining the asset protections and the trust as well. Because the beneficiary could potentially be a signatory. And you really want to make sure that you're planning your signature. The signatories are the right people that you want to have in place. People that have experience with crypto assets, and then potentially beneficiaries that can be instructed on what to do, and also essentially the settlor. The thing you have to be careful with on setting up these types of schemes is that maybe you set it up and then 5-10 years down the road before something needs to happen, are all these people available? So when you think about planning, you want to make sure that the signatories can be replaced too, because there could be a falling out. You may not want to deal with that person anymore. So the trustee should potentially have power to do to a point to get things done quickly, versus having to go to court to change these signatories. I'm sure, and keep in mind, these are suggestions, and these, this is not legal advice, but these are just some guidelines and things to think about, when you're, creating your plans. So custody is really important. Finding the right custodian to secure your digital assets is the most important thing in this space. You have your institutional custodians that have trust accounts. So that's Gemini, Coinbase, Custody, Fireblocks, and Anchorage. There's a lot more of them, like I mentioned before. Then you have your institutional exchange. So yeah, Gemini and Coinbase Pro. Coinbase tends to brand their individual products differently than Gemini does. And then retail exchanges. So like Matt mentioned before, Coinbase, the most popular exchange out there, and then you have like Kraken and Blockfolio. These types of places don't have, at the retail level, have trust accounts. So when we talk about those small amounts of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, the level of the minimums are constantly changing. It's hard to tell, and it's not very clear. So those are different options there online. And then also you have your digital wallet. So a digital wallet, and Matt talked a little bit about this, is essentially software that, say, blockchain.com, Trust Wallet, or Coinbase Wallet create for you to be able to hold your Bitcoin on, say, your phone or your laptop, and tend to be things that can connect to the internet easily. And then you have your hardware wallet, like a Trezor or a Ledger. That's, like I mentioned before, is essentially you're putting your Bitcoin on that wallet, and then you're putting it in your drawer. And you have private key access to that, and you want to make sure your private keys are saved in multiple places, so you can then access that hardware wallet. And an interesting story, the Winklevoss twins, who actually are of the Facebook fame, but they actually got into Bitcoin very early on, and they were very scared of having their Bitcoin on exchanges when it was very new, and they actually basically put their private keys in different safety deposit boxes across the in bank safety deposit boxes across the country. As a way to secure their Bitcoin. So they actually had to potentially, if they wanted to move their Bitcoin, travel to these banks, access the keys. And that was their way of making sure that they didn't have one single point of failure. And so then another option is Casa, the company I talked about before. Hopefully this is a space where I think we're going to see a lot of development from the software side. So I'm hoping that these companies get better at working with multi-signature controls, and then allowing you to pass that cryptocurrency on to the beneficiaries, but we're just not there yet. So it's really hard to balance, some people will probably listen to this presentation that are really hardcore Bitcoin people and can't believe I'm presenting the fact that you potentially might hold your coins on a institutional custodian or on a retail exchange, because they're so worried about those places being hacked, which is a risk. And that takes me kind of into the security aspect of it. Essentially, you want to make sure that you feel comfortable where your Bitcoin is, and you want to make sure you're researching where it is, whether that's at an exchange or whether you're comfortable having on a hardware wallet and having that kind of succession and plan in place with your attorney, maybe, and your successor trustees, and sharing that information with them. So it's kind of a balance of security and inheritance, and making sure you can pass that on, because exchanges do have risks. They're connected to the internet. I generally feel like anything you have connected to the internet has risks these days. So these are all things to consider. And then you should consider two-factor authentication whenever your clients should consider it whenever they're accessing the Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies on exchange. So you have something like a YubiKey. A YubiKey is something that you plug into your computer, or it also has a sensor that you can hold next to your phone, and you touch it when you log into an account. So essentially, that allows the only way somebody can access that account is they're touching the YubiKey. So that keeps kind of the hackers outside from accessing your computer or phone. Google Authenticator is a two-factor authentication for your phone. It's basically stored on your phone with codes constantly being updated. I mean, everybody's kind of gotten the text message from the bank. But Google Authenticator is even more secure because it doesn't come from, the codes are coming from your phone instead of from a secondary source that could potentially, somebody could potentially intercept that text message. But at the end of the day, hardware wallets are the most secure. But I generally think that when it comes to inheritance and large amounts of Bitcoin, there's potentially more risk with having that single point of failure than there is with the exchange risk, as long as you do your research and you find that right custodian to secure your funds. So that's what I had for today. We can now open it up to any questions anybody has. I think we already had a couple of them in there. I don't know if Matt, you want to take a look at what's in there?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just read them in the order in which they came in. So Roberta asked, I think this is a fair question. Roberta asks, how is the growth data, the data that I was showing, and Joe, the historical price data, how is that data compiled if it's private? It's important to understand, I think, that what is private is the private key that provides access to the wallet for the wallet holder. That's what's really private. The transactions that take place on any given blockchain, and there are a gazillion blockchains. Bitcoin is its own blockchain. Ether runs on the Ethereum blockchain. There are a bunch of different blockchains. The transactions that take place on the blockchain, those are not private, they're pseudonymous. So every transaction is represented by a string of characters. And that string of characters is a sender address or a recipient address. And the transaction indicates what time a transaction took place and what transacted, X number of Bitcoin, for example. So then we have aggregators that can then provide market data pulling off of all of these exchanges that Joe was talking about that have spot prices all the time. So we know what the price action is at any given time. We can see the volume of transactions that take place. We can see the number of Bitcoin or whatever that moves around, and we know when it moved what that was worth. So one of the things that I would point you to is the very last slide in the slide deck is a compilation of just a handful of the websites that we refer to from time to time that provide you all of this data. And it's really, really fascinating. Okay, somebody wants the slide deck with the slide with our
Jess is going to provide the slide deck after the after the meeting.
Cool. Okay. So, I mean, I hope that answers the question. It gets kind of confusing pretty quickly. And I can tell you that although the learning curve to crypto for somebody who's not crypto native, I'm not, it's a steep learning curve. But I started this journey 4 years ago when I first got in the crypto space, and I feel like I'm just now getting a hold of it. But there's more information now than there was even 4 years ago. So one of the most approachable books that I would recommend people pick up, actually there are two books I would recommend people pick up. They're both referenced in the materials. And I have no relationship with any of these people. I'm not shilling anything, but probably the best overall book is called Bitcoin Clarity by Kiara Bickers. Bitcoin Clarity by Kiara Bickers. And in the very first chapter of her book, she walks through from a non-technician's perspective, so it's written for lawyers like us, um, what a blockchain is, how it works, what private keys are, how they work. And so within the course of 6 or 7 pages, you get a non-technical explanation told in kind of storytelling form how this works. Really, really good and really approachable. The other book that I would really recommend any attorney pick up for sure. I'm probably gonna butcher the name or get it wrong, but the author I know for sure. The author is Pamela Morgan. That's Pamela Morgan, and she's got a book called Cryptoasset Inheritance Planning or something like that. It's available on Amazon for like $20, $30, something like that. It's a few years old, but the concepts in there are still spot on. She's an attorney, and she's also heavily involved in the crypto space. She's become kind of a known quantity there. I would recommend that anybody pick up those books for a deeper understanding. Another question that Noah talks about, we talked about a lot, the fragility of these assets and the fact that if you lose your key and your crypto can't be recovered, what happens? Well, he asks, does the loss of your key, if you can't access that crypto, does that then somehow increase the value of the findable assets on there? And I think that in most cases, I think the answer will be yes, with an exception perhaps. In the case of Bitcoin, I think the answer is absolutely yes, because Bitcoin is one of the types of crypto assets that has scarcity built into the algorithm, itself, built into the open source software that is Bitcoin. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin issued. There is a set release schedule that tapers over time. And so it's not like, hey, world, all of a sudden there's 21 million Bitcoins. The Bitcoins get released to the blockchain every time a block is perfected. So about every 10 minutes or so, new Bitcoin are released to the miners. That creates the pool of new resources. And so there's a deflationary algorithm that distributes fewer and fewer Bitcoin over time. And so at the end of the day, in 2140, they're predicting 2140 is when the last Bitcoin will be released to the wild. And so there's that inherent scarcity. Well, just logic tells me that if tokens are lost, and we know that several million tokens have already been lost, it's estimated 2 to 3 million tokens have been lost due to this whole private key issue. That just means instead of 21 million, maybe there will only ever be 18 million, or maybe only 17.5 million. And so it's a law of supply and demand. If demand continues to increase and if supply continues to contract, the more it contracts and the more demand increases, the higher the value will go. And we've kind of seen that over time. Other tokens don't have that scarcity algorithm built in. So it kind of depends on the crypto asset that we're talking about.
I was looking at Roberta's question. The successor trustee have duty to find out if past taxes on cryptocurrency were paid on death of owner. And, it's a great question. I think so. I mean, if you knew that they had crypto, you would probably need to find out, if that, because there is, there's liability there. Now, is the government going to find out? Probably not. But if they start to get, they've said they're going to regulate it more, they're going to tax it more, and they're going to be on, I wouldn't say they're going to tax it more, they're just going to be more focused on it. So, I would say yes, obviously depending on statutes of limitations and things like that and what you have to do. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think that, if you don't report, or if you don't adequately report, the statute of limitations never starts to run. And so I think if the fiduciary discovers that there's crypto in a client's plan, then you're going to have to start doing some forensics to figure out, certainly looking at the prior tax returns to see if gains or losses were reported. And probably talk to a crypto specific tax advisor. And there's some right there in California. You know, and I would ask them, say, look, is there a way that we can audit the client's blockchain transaction records to determine if there were trades that took place or liquidations that took place that may not have been reported? Because if I'm the trustee, I'm not sure I want to, I'm quite certain I do not want to step into an estate to administer where I've got a strong suspicion that there is looming income tax liability. Because then if I administer the estate and distribute the assets to the beneficiaries, where does the liability ride? With the trustee who distributed.
Great, thanks, Matt. It looks like we have Paige jumped in late. Yes, the recording will be available. Jess, do you want to say how that might be available?
Sure, it's to be determined. I think the Bar Association is working on creating a database, and I think that's coming in soon here. So I'll have more information on that at the Bar World soon.
Paige, I can shoot you an email. I can shoot you an email with it potentially too once I get a copy of it.
One thing I'd like to add on here, which is not a question that was asked, but I think it's a question that's probably lurking in some people's minds. If I'm a fiduciary, or if I'm an attorney who advises fiduciaries, how do I even know if my client or the settlor had crypto? How do I find out? I mean, if it's not obvious. Well, so some of the things to think about is when you're taking inventory of the decedent's assets, you're looking for hardware devices, you're looking for computers, you're certainly looking for mobile devices. And if you come across, for example, one of these peripheral devices that just looks kind of funky, it's a little black box with a hole for a cord in the side of it, that might be a clue. Principally, once you have access to the client's computer, assuming you can get into the computer through the biometrics or the passwords that lock it, you're going to check their browser history. You're going to check their email history, and you're looking for transactions with anybody who's some of these names that Joe has referenced, these entities where people are buying and selling. Look at their tabs on their browsers, look at their software inventory inside of their applications. All of those things will start to flag you to think, you know what, there may be some kind of digital representation of value. Because if, you know, and I do, I mean, I have crypto asset investments that are accessible through web pages and only accessible through web pages. So if you were able to get into my browser and go through my tabs, you could find where I've got various assets kind of scattered around. So you know, I think that if anything else, you should just be alerted to the possibility that your decedents, whose estates you're administering now, may very well have had some type of digital asset that has monetary value. And again, part of the reason I started the conversation the way I started it is it doesn't have to be a dead millennial. It could be anybody who's got some type of crypto asset. So it just needs to be part of your analysis as you're doing the estate intake.
I skipped over Noah's question, Matt. What do you think about you know, if a fiduciary doesn't have a relationship with the essentially, you know, the trustor, you know, what's the liability, you know, if we don't receive the crypto info, we can't find it, but then the beneficiary says you didn't find it. What do you think the liability is there?
Well, I think it depends on what. This is not going to be a gratifying answer, but I think the answer depends on what the judge says. You know, have you done your due diligence? I mean, have you done all those things that I've mentioned? Have you gone through every single digital record? Have you gone through the decedent's social media pages to see what pages they're following, who they follow on Twitter, who they're connected to on LinkedIn? Look at their browser history, look at their bank records. Do they have outgoing transactions to Coinbase, for example?
That's a good point. Good one.
You know, all that kind of stuff. That's part of the forensic due diligence we all have to do. And so I think if you have done that and you're coming up with nothing, and somehow, somewhere, somebody says, what about that? Well, if you've covered all your bases as best you can, I think you're going to be in good shape. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a conversation with your fiduciary liability insurer and the judge. One point I'd like to make, kind of my parting thought on this, is that it's really important, I think, that we realize that we are dealing with brand new issues. The first successful blockchain launched on January 3rd, 2009. It's 12 years old. The first blockchain is 12 years old. Okay. So the law has not had a chance to catch up. The practice of law has not had the chance to catch up. And critical to the success of the blockchain is this idea of disintermediation between human relationships, the ability to exchange information or data or value from peer to peer without going through some central intermediary. That is core to the function of blockchain. And so that ethos pervades blockchain. So for us to be able to address this issue and address this asset class and address the value in these asset classes for our clients, it's going to require different solutions than we have right now. I like to say that what got us where we are is not going to get us where we're going. And that is so true in the crypto space.
Okay, well, thank you, Matt and Joe. We appreciate your time. This was very, very helpful. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. So are you open to people reaching out to you? We have your contact information in the slide deck, with Jess will be disseminating. So I would like to encourage people, to the extent you're comfortable with that, to reach out to you if they have questions offline. We've gone a little bit over, but it was a very technical subject, and we thank everybody for hanging with us, and really appreciate your information that you've given us. It's been very helpful. So thank you, everyone. And we will be in touch about our next meeting, and we'll be sending out information soon about a fall in-person gathering for our section. So we're all really excited to be getting back together. And thank you again to our speakers. We can tell a lot of work went into this presentation, and we appreciate it. So thank you, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's been an honor.